There is a road in America with a name so dark, so deeply unsettling, that the county had to grease the pole holding its sign just to stop people from stealing it. A road so notorious that the moment people hear its name, something instinctive inside them says, "Do not go there alone." That road is real. It exists right now, cutting through the dense, lightless forests of Warren County in the northwestern corner of New Jersey. It is approximately 6.7 miles long, 2 lanes, no streetlights, and it carries a name that has never been explained, not fully, not satisfactorily, by anyone who has ever tried. It is called Shades of Death Road. Say that slowly. Let it settle. Not just a haunted name given to some forgotten dirt track by teenagers with a flair for drama. This road has appeared on maps for centuries. Locals whisper it like a curse. Paranormal investigators from across the country have traveled here, set up their equipment, and come back changed, or not come back at all with a rational explanation for what they experienced. Academics have debated the origin of the name. Historians have searched archives, and yet the true reason this road carries that particular combination of words remains, to this day, officially unknown. But the darkness behind the name, that part is very, very well documented. The road winds alongside Jenny Jump State Forest, and even that name carries its own horror story, which we will get to. The surrounding region is known as the Great Meadows, once a vast, open area of marshy swampland where early settlers tried to carve out a life against brutal odds. Today, driving along Shades of Death Road, you would see farmland to your left, a wall of dense, ancient trees to your right, and overhead, the interlacing canopy of branches so thick they block the sun even in broad daylight. On cloudy days, this road exists in a kind of perpetual twilight, and at night, this road becomes something else entirely. The darkness here is not just the absence of light, it feels inhabited. Several theories exist for how the road got its name, and each one is more disturbing than the last. The most commonly cited explanation involves a vicious gang of squatters who occupied this isolated stretch of land in the 18th and 19th centuries. These were not ordinary men. They were outlaws, drifters, and criminals, people who had been driven to the margins of civilization and had carved out a brutal existence in the marshlands and dense forest along this corridor. They fought constantly over women, over territory, over perceived slights that most people would have forgotten by morning. And their fights didn't end in bruises, they ended in death. Multiple deaths, so many deaths that the area surrounding this road became associated with violence and bloodshed to such a degree that people began giving it a name that reflected what it truly was. They called it Shades of Death, and the name stuck for centuries. A second theory speaks not of murder, but of the road's physical character. Before it had any formal name, locals called it simply the Shades, because the tree canopy was so dense, so unbroken, that the road existed in near permanent shadow, even on the brightest summer afternoons. Travelers passing through would feel the temperature drop, the light fade, and a strange, oppressive weight settle over them as they moved under that endless tunnel of branches. But then, the murders started, and the killings piled up, and eventually the community began calling it not just the Shades, but the Shades of Death, because the darkness overhead seemed to attract something that killed. There is a third theory, and it has nothing to do with violence at all, at least not human violence. Around the year 1850, a catastrophic outbreak of malaria swept through the communities lining this road. The swampland nearby was breeding ground for mosquitoes carrying the disease, and year after year, families would lose children, parents, neighbors, entire households decimated not by weapons, but by the invisible terror of a plague carried on tiny wings through the thick, humid air of the New Jersey marshlands. Bodies lined the roads waiting for doctors who couldn't come fast enough. Graves were dug by the dozens, and a road that had already carried a dark reputation found itself accumulating death by yet another means. People began to say that the road itself was cursed, that the land beneath it was sick, that whatever rested in that soil, whatever had soaked into the earth over generations of violence and suffering, was now releasing itself into the air, into the water, into the blood of anyone who stayed too long. Picture yourself driving this road at night for the first time. Your headlights push a narrow cone of light forward, but the trees swallow it almost immediately. There are no guardrails on long stretches, no median, no other cars for miles. The road bends unexpectedly, sharply, giving you almost no time to react. And somewhere out there in the darkness beyond the tree line, past the edge of your headlights, something is watching. You feel it before you see anything, that primal sensation at the back of your skull, that raised hair on the back of your neck, the biological alarm system your ancestors evolved to warn them about predators in the dark. On Shades of Death Road, that alarm never turns off. The documented murders associated with this road are not legends. They are recorded events, referenced in regional histories and paranormal archives alike. In the 1920s and 30s, at least 3 separate killings occurred along this 7-mile stretch, each one as brutal as the last, and each one carrying an element of horror beyond just the act of killing itself. The first involved an elderly man who was pulled from his vehicle by an assailant who had been waiting for him in the dark beside the road. The weapon used was a tire jack, a heavy, blunt piece of metal taken from the man's own automobile. The motive was robbery. The elderly man was known to carry a collection of gold coins, and someone knew this. Someone had been watching him. The killing was carried out with savage force, and the victim was left beside the road where he fell. The killer was never identified. The gold was never recovered. The second murder involves a man named Bill Cummins, and this case is perhaps the most chilling of all, not because of the method, but because of what came after. Cummins was shot in cold blood somewhere along this road. His body was not left in the open. Whoever killed him buried him, not in a cemetery, not in a field, but directly in the roadside mud, concealed beneath the earth within feet of where travelers walked and drove every single day. The motive for his killing was never established. His killer was never found. And to this day, the identity of whoever ended Bill Cummins' life on this dark road remains one of Warren County's most enduring unsolved mysteries. Imagine driving past that exact spot. You have done it. Everyone who has ever traveled this road has driven over the ground where a dead man was buried and forgotten. But neither of those murders is the most disturbing story connected to this road. That distinction belongs to a crime of passion so extreme, so methodical in its savagery, that it reads less like a murder and more like a ritual. A woman, allegedly a jilted lover consumed by obsession and rage, tracked down the man who had left her. She killed him on or near this road, and then she did not stop at killing. She decapitated him. She dismembered the body. And then, perhaps most horrifying of all, she carried the pieces to different locations along the road and buried them separately, as though trying to prevent him from ever being whole again, not just in life, but in death. Think about that for a moment. Someone walked the length of this road, in the dark, carrying pieces of a human being and buried them along the route that people use every single day. Historians believe the total death toll associated with Shades of Death Road, counting the murders, the malaria deaths, the killings attributed to highwaymen and squatters over the centuries, runs into the dozens. Some say higher. One account suggests that during the era of the squatter gangs, mobs may have lynched as many as 42 people along this corridor, leaving their bodies to decompose in the swamps and marshes, or throwing them into the dark water of the lake that now bears a name that tells its own story. Ghost Lake. Ghost Lake sits just off Shades of Death Road, within the boundaries of Jenny Jump State Forest. Its name is not a marketing gimmick or a tourist attraction. It predates any tourism by generations. The lake earned its name because of what people claim to see rising from its surface and what they claim to see walking on it. On certain nights, particularly in late autumn when the temperature differential between the water and the air reaches a specific threshold, the lake exhales. There is no other word for it. Columns of mist rise from the surface slowly, silently, in shapes that have no scientific reason to resemble human forms, but they do. Fishermen, hikers, and late-night visitors have all reported seeing these pillars of fog rise and move and drift across the water in patterns that are not consistent with simple evaporation. Pete Valieri, a fisherman who has worked these waters for decades, stated plainly, "I've seen it when I was fishing. Something rises from that lake. I don't know what it is." Local legend offers one answer. The local indigenous Lenape people who inhabited this land long before European settlers arrived were massacred here, not in battle, in betrayal. Early settlers who had initially coexisted with the Lenape turned on them, killing them and disposing of their bodies in the lake, without proper burial rites, without ceremony, without honor. And it is believed by those who know this land's history that those souls, denied the passage that their spiritual traditions required, are still here, still moving, still waiting, rising from the water in columns of mist on cold, dark nights, searching for something they can never find. That is what you are driving past when you pass Ghost Lake. That is what is watching.
There is a ritual that has been passed down among the teenagers and thrill seekers of Warren County for generations. It concerns a specific bridge on Shades of Death Road. You drive to it at night, alone, ideally, if you want the full effect. You stop the car in the middle of the road. You turn off your headlights. The darkness that descends is absolute. You cannot see the steering wheel in front of your face. You cannot see the windshield. There is nothing, just black, and the sound of your own breathing, and the distant dripping of water somewhere in the trees. Then you honk your horn. Once, twice, 3 times, and you wait. According to multiple eyewitness accounts shared across decades, what you see next are 2 children, small figures at the edge of the road or sometimes in the middle of it, pale, still, illuminated by no visible light source. They are the ghosts of 2 young children who were struck and killed by a vehicle while playing on this road. No one has ever established when this accident occurred. No one has ever found the official record. But the reports of the children appearing at that bridge have been consistent for as long as anyone can remember. One driver described stopping at the bridge, performing the ritual, and seeing nothing, then starting to drive away. Within seconds, a light appeared in his rearview mirror. Not the soft glow of a distant car, a single blinding light, the height of a truck's headlamp, but moving at the speed of a motorcycle, staying exactly 20 feet behind him no matter how fast he accelerated. He pushed his car to speeds that had no place on a 2-lane road in the dark. The light stayed with him. He reached the end of Shades of Death Road, turned on to the connecting highway, and the light was gone, vanished. He stopped the car, got out, and looked in every direction. Nothing. Just the empty road behind him, and silence, and the slow realization that whatever had been following him had stopped at the boundary of the road, as though it could not leave. That detail, the idea that something is bound to this road, appears again and again in the accounts of people who have visited Shades of Death. Not just following, but guarding, protecting something, or keeping something in. The Lenape people understood this land differently than the Europeans who displaced them. To the Lenape, the earth here was not just physical terrain, it was layered with spiritual meaning. The areas surrounding Shades of Death Road were considered sacred, not because they were beautiful or peaceful, but because they were a threshold, a place where the boundary between the living and the dead was thinner than elsewhere. They did not fear this place, they respected it. They approached it with ceremony, with prayer, with understanding of what lay on the other side of that thinning veil. Nowhere is that significance more tangible than at the Ferry Hole, a limestone cave located just off the road, set into a hillside near Ghost Lake. In 1918, archaeologists first explored the cave and found pottery shards, flint tools, and arrowheads consistent with Lenape craftsmanship, dating back hundreds of years. The proximity of the cave to multiple Lenape burial sites strongly suggested that this was not simply a dwelling, it was a ceremonial space, a place of contact between the world of the living and the world of the dead. The academic consensus is cautious, measured, but the accounts of people who visit the fairy hole today are nothing but measured. They describe a specific sensation the moment they enter, a drop in temperature that has no relationship to the ambient air outside, a pressure in the chest as though something is pushing against your sternum from the inside, a sound, low and difficult to locate, that could be the cave itself settling or could be something that has no geological explanation. And voices. Not clear words, nothing as convenient as that, but a murmuring, a presence of sound where there should be silence. Multiple visitors have reported an overwhelming compulsion to leave, not just a preference, not simple discomfort, a biological imperative, the kind your body generates when it senses danger. Several people have said they were inside the cave for less than 60 seconds before they simply could not stay. Something in there does not want company. Now follow the road a little further. Turn left onto Lenape Lane, a small side road that branches off Shades of Death, named, not coincidentally, to the people who once considered this land sacred. At the end of Lenape Lane, visitors have found what remains of an old stable, abandoned, decayed, its roof partially collapsed, its walls leaning at angles that suggest the structure is held upright by something other than engineering. Two men who visited the stable one night in the early hours of the morning reported that as they approached it, they felt a cold that was independent of the air temperature, a localized chill that seemed to emanate from the building itself.
There are 12 bumps in the road on Shades of Death. 12. If you drive it slowly, deliberately, you will feel them beneath your tires. Slight irregularities in the asphalt. Dismissed by most as simple road degradation in a region of harsh winters and aging infrastructure. But locals have a different explanation, one that predates the paving of the road entirely. The story goes that long ago, in the era when this road was still a dirt track through swampland, a family was buried here. Not in a cemetery, not in consecrated ground, in shallow graves dug hastily along the roadside, covered with just enough soil to make them invisible to casual passersby. Over time, as the road was graded and eventually paved, the graves were simply incorporated into the surface, covered over, and the 12 bumps that drivers feel to this day are what remains of 12 bodies beneath the asphalt. One of them, the story says, belongs to a small boy, and unlike the others, he is not resting. He is watching. He is waiting for someone to acknowledge that he is there. Whether or not you believe that story, the idea lodges in your mind and does not leave easily. Because the next time you drive a road and feel an unexpected bump, you will think of it. You will wonder, just for a fraction of a second, what is beneath you. And that is exactly what this road does to people. It doesn't just frighten you in the moment. It follows you home. Drivers who have spent a single night on Shades of Death Road describe dreams that continue for weeks afterward. Not nightmares necessarily, but a specific quality of unease, an awareness late at night in their own beds that the darkness in the room is slightly more present than it should be. A sound in a hallway that they would normally attribute to the house settling, but which now makes their skin tighten in a way they cannot justify. There is an abandoned cabin near Ghost Lake, or rather, there was. Over the years, the structure has continued its slow collapse back into the forest floor. But in the years when it still stood, it attracted a particular category of visitor: the curious, the daring, and the deeply unfortunate. The cabin's interior was chaos. Broken windows letting in the cold, walls dissolving from rot and moisture, floorboards punched through by decades of neglect. But in one corner of the structure, there was a hallway, and built into the wall of that hallway was a piano. Not a piano that had been moved there and left, a piano that appeared to be original to the structure, or at least had been there for so long that the wall had grown around it and the two had become inseparable. Groups of visitors who entered the cabin reported hearing this piano play.
Not a full composition, nothing melodic or arranged, but a sudden, violent crash of keys, as though something had struck the instrument hard in the dark. And then, footsteps. Glass on the floor of the hallway crunching under weight that was invisible. The sound moving closer, a flashlight beam revealing nothing, no source, no explanation. And then the absolute instinctive certainty shared by everyone in the room simultaneously that it was time to leave. Those who have explored the old barn further along the road report something even more physically confronting. The barn's history includes an account, unverified but repeatedly told, of a man who was hanged inside it. Whether it was suicide or murder depends on the version of the story being told. What is consistent across every account of people who have entered this structure is the experience of being physically struck by something that isn't there. Not a light touch.
One person who went there with his brother returned and could not speak about what happened inside. He went in with 4 friends. He came out and would only say, "We were hit. All of us. I will never go back." Directly above one end of Shades of Death Road runs the overpass of Route 80. And on certain nights, drivers on the road below report looking up at that bridge and seeing a figure standing on the railing, motionless, and then jumping. The figure falls and never lands. It disappears before it reaches the road below. No impact, no body, just the fall, and then nothing. Some have speculated this is the ghost of a person who died at this overpass. Others refuse to speculate at all, because once you've seen it, once you've watched something fall and not land, speculation seems almost disrespectful to the terror of the experience. There is something else about Shades of Death Road that is not supernatural in origin, but is perhaps more psychologically disturbing than any ghost story: the isolation. This road exists in one of the few remaining zones of genuine darkness in the northeastern United States, a region where light pollution from cities and highways has scrubbed the night sky of stars and diluted the darkness to a manageable gray. But here, the forest absorbs everything. There are sections of this road where your headlights seem to push against the darkness and lose, where the trees close overhead so tightly that you cannot see the sky, cannot orient yourself to anything outside the narrow tunnel of your own forward momentum. You are, in every meaningful sense, alone. Even if another car passes you, it is gone in seconds, and the darkness closes back like water over a stone. The road sign itself has become a cultural artifact. For decades, people stole it, not just 1 or 2, but continuously, a revolving door of theft that forced Warren County authorities to first grease the pole holding it, and then eventually to physically alter the sign itself to make it harder to remove. Think about that for a moment. The sign for this road is so universally desired as a trophy that the county government had to engineer its removal prevention. There is no other road in New Jersey, possibly in America, where the sign carries that level of dark celebrity. People want a piece of it. They want proof that they were there, that they stood under that name in the dark and survived. Because survival is not guaranteed here. Not spiritually, not psychologically. People come to Shades of Death Road looking for a thrill, and many of them find something far more substantial.